Like, I got sick of being a carbon copy of everyone else manufactured in Photoshop. Okay, I got sick of taking on Hollywood's image. I'm going to be myself, the unique, original masterpiece that God made me. And I want to look more and more like Christ every day in an anti-Christ world that copy and paste people into the same cloned image. I don't want conformity. I want originality. For years, we've been conditioned by diet culture and Hollywood to think that skinniness equals beauty, equals happiness, equals worth or value or acceptance or success. You know, we've been blasted by diet culture, like on billboards and magazines and TV, and just pictures of models photoshopped into like sizes that don't even exist. You know, sizes that don't even exist in reality. So what happens next is that we become slaves to dieting, you know, like chasing a false standard of beauty created in Photoshop, but we're chasing something that doesn't even exist, right? We're like living in the destination mentality, which is really just greed and idolatry. And it says, like, if only I had this, I'd be happy. So in this case, like, if only I were skinny, then I would be happy, I'd be successful, I'd be beautiful, things like that. But like pretty soon we're down that rabbit hole because dieting turns into like full-blown eating disorder. And honestly, guys, I'm convinced that eating disorders are like Satan's own personal vendetta against women and men at times. Like Satan uses diet culture to prey on our vulnerabilities and insecurities and like really just hold us captive to them. And through diet culture, turn us into these carbon copies of each other so that eventually we take on the image of Hollywood, right? Like, you ever notice celebrities before and after Hollywood? So they enter these like unique individuals and emerge just carbon copies, like clones of one another. And that's what Satan wants, whether it's in Hollywood or education. Satan wants conformity because then there's no longer like God's unique masterpiece, God's unique artistry, but we become clones in his army, kind of like recreated into his image. So he wants us in chains to conformity, to lies, to diet culture, to scales, to someone else's image, you know, to false identities, to dysfunction and disorders. He wants us in chains to everything but Christ. Christ himself is our beauty, okay? He is our peace. He is our joy. He's our worth. He's our confidence, our value, our success. You know, we don't need to go searching for it out in the world or in ourselves or on scales when we have it in him, right? So when we receive him as our enough and we drink from the cup of his heart, we become dissatisfied with everything else. And we lose the taste for the things of this world. You know, Psalm 34:8 says, taste and see that the Lord is good. Now, we're made in God's image and like we're hardwired for certain things, right? Like we crave intimacy and relationships and love and joy and peace and acceptance and like value and satisfaction, you know? The fact that we have a spiritual like meter in us that tells us when we're low on these things or spiritually dry or empty or purposeless, this points straight back to God. And it proves that we're designed with intent and purpose and made for him and by him. So we crave acceptance because we were created to enjoy his acceptance. We crave relationship because we were created for a relationship with him. You know, like we crave justice when we witness injustice because we were made for a moral order. So there's a God-shaped hole in our hearts that only God can fill. Yet we search for fulfillment. We search for God, really, you know, in the world and in ourselves, but nothing will be able to match what Christ has already won for us. So why is this important? Because no amount of dieting can earn for us the acceptance that Christ has already won for us, right? No amount of skinniness can earn us the worth that Christ gives us. No amount of compulsive working out can give us the joy and the peace that he offers us. No amount of like calorie counting can earn us the approval that Christ earned for us. And no amount of starvation and purging can vindicate us from the guilt that Christ already crucified on the cross. So all of these are just like mock ways, like counterfeit ways to do for us what's already been done for us by Christ. So all this to say that Christ is the way to the Father. He is the way to restoration, redemption, and shalom with others and with ourselves. He is the way because he has made the way for us to receive like all that we were created for all along, right? Relationship with God. But when we serve other masters and try to earn our own way and like vindicate ourselves from our own guilt, or like clothe our own shame, we're denying that Christ is the way. And we're subconsciously saying, I'm going to create a new way to do for me what Jesus has already done for me. So if we affirm that Jesus is our way, then we really have all we need in him, and we don't need to look to other ways or like invent mock paths. So I want to encourage you and challenge you really to evaluate the ways that you're trying to forge your own path to the Father through your own efforts, right? Or like works, really just dysfunctions. Like, what counterfeit ways are you making that rival Christ as the way? Not that he can have a rival, but you know what I mean? And I want to encourage you and challenge you to reject these ways, right? To shun the lies of diet culture, like that you have to look a certain way to be beautiful or happy or like to be accepted or worthy or whatever, shun the lies that you have to make your own way and carve your own path to the Father, because you are fully accepted by the Father on the basis of Christ, not anything you do. And definitely not your size or your looks or your calorie intake for the day or whatever the scale says, So like you can reject the verdict of the judge and the jury, which is the scale and the measuring tape, because Christ is your vindicator, and he went to the cross to settle your guilt, to settle your shame. And here's the truth. The scale will never tell you who you are and always tell you who you're not. Like, have you noticed that? Okay, it'll say you're not accepted, you're not valuable, you're not lovable, no matter what weight you are, no matter what number it throws back at you. It is subconsciously or subliminally or whatever, just always saying these things. But God will always tell you who you are. Okay? Loved, lavished, chosen, wanted, adopted, his own masterpiece. So let him vindicate you from guilt, okay? Let him clothe your shame. Let him collect your tears and cradle your emotions and carry your burdens. Let him heal your past wounds. Let him shoulder your anxieties because he cares for you. The scale and diet culture, it doesn't care for you. Like, how many times does the Bible warn us not to put our trust or our hope in worthless idols that don't care about us, that like don't even have the capacity to reciprocate the love and devotion that we exert? So don't bother wasting your precious devotion and attention on idols that aren't even capable of reciprocity, right? Of loving you back. Instead, like, we can pour out our hearts before God, our healer and our restorer. And this is how we remove the fig leaf clothing, which is really just like our own attempts to heal ourselves and self-medicate. But this is how we remove that fig leaf clothing that we've dressed ourselves in, by turning to our perfect dad, by turning to Jesus, by whose stripes we are spiritually healed and made whole. Okay, now I want to show you this picture, and I want to make something clear, okay? The difference between the first two photos and the third one is God, okay? So I'm not boasting in myself or advocating like displaced idolatry or addiction transference or like extremism, like going from starvation to bodybuilding. No, I'm not advocating that. I'm advocating the transformative work that God does in our hearts and minds that allows us to break free. I'm advocating renewing of our minds, not in the world, but in the Word, and being sanctified in truth. So I'm advocating like breaking free from the prison of diet culture and from the lies of Satan. So on the left/middle is a girl who survived on salad and lies, scared of food, terrified to gain weight because the number on the scale defined her. She served the god of calories and was a slave to control. She tried to find her worth in skinniness and acceptance through fitting in and like being a clone of everyone else, of Hollywood. And she was so broken, she wasn't just starving out food, she was starving out her guilt and purging her shame. The girl on the left was a slave, okay? She was a slave trying to make her own ways and do for herself what Christ already did for her on the cross. That girl has died with Christ. And on the right is a woman who feasts on God's truth, rejects the devil's lies, whose fear met their end at God's perfect love, who isn't afraid to nourish her temple, who finds freedom in surrender and giving God control, she embraces Jesus as the way, as, you know, her way, as her enough. And she knows who she is in Christ, and she finds her identity and purpose and joy and worth in him. So she isn't afraid to be different and stand out. She knows she's vindicated from her guilt and is no longer condemned. So yeah, on the right is a free woman raised to life with King Jesus, and that woman is me. And that's what I want to make absolutely clear. When we embrace Jesus as our way to acceptance and worth and joy in the Father, we're set free from following these like counterfeit ways. See, I didn't get that way through diet culture, all right? I got that way by rebelling against diet culture and by nourishing my body with no fear. I wasn't afraid to eat and gain weight because God had changed my heart and my mind and my vision to feel and think and see myself differently. Like, I got sick of being a carbon copy of everyone else manufactured in Photoshop. Okay, I got sick of taking on Hollywood's image. I'm going to be myself, the unique, original masterpiece that God made me. And I want to look more and more like Christ every day in an anti-Christ world that copy and paste people into the same cloned image. I don't want conformity. I want originality. I want his identity for me, his plans and purposes for me, his vision for my life, and not anyone else's. So I challenge you to rebel against your fears, against the lies, okay, against the world, against diet culture, against Satan. I challenge you to chase rebellion against this world because that's really what holiness is, right? That's what true worship of God looks like, being a living sacrifice. Obedience to God is rebellion against this world, Romans 12:2. And what that looks like is breaking free from those lies that we're told, and viewing ourselves as a set-apart temple, his masterpiece that he made, and taking care of ourselves to honor his work, you know, like his art. Because when we don't, guys, we're slandering our artist. We're slandering God. So let's be rebels for Christ and obey him, okay? Let's be rebels and find our identity in him. Let's be rebels and say no to Satan's deceptions and yes to God's truth. I encourage you to just embrace Jesus as the way, as your way, Yahweh, to receiving everything that you've ever been created for in the Father, and just to have all of your needs met in him. All right, guys, so I hope this video shed light on a lot of stuff for you, and I hope it was encouraging. And yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. God bless you.